everybody. Welcome back to the Connor Larsen Show, episode 4. I had a great week. I hope you had a good week. It's April in Nashville. It's go time. This is what we've been waiting for. I didn't realize it. This is the perfect time. Everything's going in the ground. Everything's growing. Comedy festival was last weekend. I'm having a great time. So I hope you're having a good time too. I love spring. It is the best season. It is the best. People say, no, I like fall. And you go, well, you're wrong about that. It's spring. But yeah, this is very fun. I hope I got a lot of nice comments in all the episodes so far, and that's great. I'm just trying to learn about stuff I like and hopefully make it interesting for an audience. And yeah, thank you. Thanks everybody for listening. So this week was Nashville Comedy Festival for Nashville. It was very fun. I got to be part of that. I think I was on 8 shows over the week, which was great. All sorts of different shows. And comedy festival is very fun. You get to hang out with your friends a lot. That's a really underrated part of comedy, is you get to be a grown man. You get to be 33 years old, and you get to be like, I'm going to go hang out with my friends. And it's not, we didn't have to, fly to Las Vegas to do it. We're just going to hang. Regular comedy shows, you hang a little bit. You hang in the green room, but then you leave. And after a while, you start to be like, I got to get out of here. I can't be in bars every night till 2 a.m. like I did when I first started doing open mics. That's like the payoff, because the shows are horrific when you first start doing shows. So the payoff is you're like, I'm with my friend, we're at a bar. And, I got a little bit of attention from bombing up there. Everyone in the bar knows me. They go, hey, weren't you just making a fool out of yourself? And you go, yes, I was. Thank you. They go, well, I'm still not buying you a drink. But now with Comedy Fest, it's fun. It's fun. There's all sorts of people coming through town. And I got to meet a lot of cool people, that was fun. But you get to hang out like late. There's shows. There's all these shows. There's shows at the Ryman. There's shows at Bridgestone Arena. I was not on any of those. There's shows at Zanies and the Lab and all the great venues. And then people come hang after, and there's sort of like an understood, there's going to be a hang afterwards, which is great, because usually people sort of disperse, but people know like, okay, there will be something to do, and you get to meet, you get to see all your friends, and just, I don't know. I mean, it takes a lot out of you from a sleep perspective. Every year, it's just me and my wife. My wife works at the club. We both are like, man, this is a lot. Just from how many shows they're doing and how late you're there perspective. But it's very fun. And yeah, I'll be posting some clips from the shows I did and all that stuff. So I had a great time. But the other half of my life, the daytime stuff, I've been, deep in the garden still. And this week I want to do an episode about invasive species, because it's so funny. You can kind of only say that with plants these days. You can only do a podcast about invasive species if you're talking about you're like, this tree should not be here. That's the only way. But it is a real problem. And I didn't know any of this, but I've been, as I get further and further into the garden, you start to realize there's a real system going on. It's funny when you're not paying attention, you just go like, I don't know, everything's fine. And then as you get deeper into it, you look at a plant and you go like, oh, I bet you that is growing well there because it's getting afternoon shade. It gets complete 180 where you start seeing the matrix, the plant matrix. And as I have been learning about stuff, you start to realize like, man, a lot of what's going on in the environment, when you look around, a lot of that stuff is bad. Not like, whatever. At a certain, we'll get into this in the episode, but it is hard to say, if a plant comes over in 1500, becomes part of the, culture, great, right? Like tomatoes in Italy, those are all, technically, those are imported. I don't think this qualifies as an invasive species. An invasive species is something that's messing stuff up. But I'm just saying, you can adopt a plant. It's great that, it's great. I think maple trees, I think I read a thing that they were originally from Asia. And I think maple trees are the most beautiful trees. And, that's great. I don't know if that's true, though, because Canada's so into them. But maybe. I don't know. The point is just I'm sure there are some good plants that come from other places, and it's great to be able to trade plants and do all that stuff. But sometimes, and that's what we're going to get to in this episode, and it's a lot of times it's the government. I hate to, I know you're going to be like, Connor, it feels like you're consistently blaming the government for lots of things, and that might be true. But it's more just the way, it's like the classic way the government does anything, where it's just like, just do it. And then they don't think about, second order consequences and what's going to happen. And a lot of these invasive species that we got here, especially in the South or in Nashville especially, they started with someone being like, this is a great idea. And now there are huge problems. And it's interesting, the stuff that I've learned in this episode about what's an invasive species. First of all, most invasive plant species in Tennessee are from Asia. And it sounds like I'm just picking on them, but that's not, I'm not mad at Asians. It's because it's the same climate. That's what I learned that doing this research. It's basically you get the invasive species from the continents across the world that have similar climates to you, right? So a lot of Southeast Asia, warm, humid, all the same stuff that we have in the American South. And then out west, the invasive species problems are these grasses that come from like the steppes, like the big flat parts of Asia, like the stands and stuff. And the problem with those grasses is they burn super well. So out west, they grow everywhere, and then they burn during these crazy wildfires, and that's like a huge problem. And then up north, they got some European plants that are a problem. I mean, it makes sense when you think about it. I didn't connect it till I read it, but it makes sense that, yeah, if you have a similar climate and they bring something in, the new plant can just kind of walk right in and be like, oh, I know how to do this. And sometimes it outcompetes the native stuff. That's a lot of, I'll give you basically, we'll go into detail on this, but basically the outline of invasive species is somebody brings them over, either for a purpose or not. Usually they think it's going to work out a certain way and it doesn't. Then it breaks contain, like Jurassic Park. The amount of these invasive plants that have a Jurassic Park arc, crazy. They're all, the guys who bring them here are like, they're going to be great. And then 2 years later, they're behind a podium being like, this is going to cost us billions of dollars. And it's just the classic, you're like, oh, why did you do that? So they bring a lot of these over, and you get a lot of them from China and Japan. And I actually have one. I got one. I'm sure I have more than one in my yard, but I got a tree of heaven in my yard, and it sucks. It sucks so much. It's the worst tree. First of all, I didn't know this, so they call it the ghetto palm. Very funny. There's a lot of very funny stuff in the plant world. There's a lot of very funny plant names. There's a lot of stuff where you're like, okay, it's a little mean, but I like it. The ghetto palm is or they call it the tree of heaven. Biggest gap between two names I've ever seen. And they call it the ghetto palm because it can grow anywhere. It grows out of cracks in sidewalks. It grows in, Philadelphia, which I'm just kidding. Philly's fine. But it does grow in like major urban cities with just where every other tree would be like, you got to treat me better than this. This tree will put up with a lot. And that's why people like it. People take advantage of it. But it's a bad tree. It stinks. When you crush up the leaves, here are the smells that this is what the government like nursery page said about the tree of heaven. These are the smells they said. Rotting fish, dumpster, and then this one, which might also be the name of my special coming out, it says fish, dumpster, and semen. And listen, I'm sorry, this is this podcast is pretty informational. You don't got to worry about me saying too much crazy stuff, but that's what they said. That's their thing. They said this tree smells like fish, dumpster, and semen, which is the worst ad for a tree I've ever seen. And so they, it's just a terrible tree, and I've been fighting it. I'm trying to make a video called Comedian Destroys Tree of Heaven. But it's a lot of work. You got to basically cut it, and then they call it hack and squirt. You got to cut the tree and then paint herbicide on there. And herbicide sucks to use because you don't want it getting in your soil, and you got to be careful with it, make sure it doesn't get anything else. And then I applied it, and then I came back in 2 weeks, and it had died back. But when you try to fight this tree, it shoots out suckers. They have all these crazy adaptations to survive. So it shoots out new roots like 10, 20 feet away. It's really crazy. And then you have to go get those. And, you're saying like, well, just because this tree stinks, you should let it be in the yard. But you can't because it has a thing called allelopathy. So it literally releases toxins into the soil to kill whatever is growing near it. So you're like, this tree just showed up and is ruining stuff. And it's the host for the spotted lanternfly, which is like a pest that destroys native Tennessee trees. And it's just a nightmare that they spotted for the first time in like 2023. That's the stuff that freaked me out doing this research. It's, I know about kudzu and all these other things, the Bradford pear, and that they're bad, but I also grew up with them. So it's kind of like, I didn't really notice. It's hard for me to be like, oh, all of a sudden. But there's some new ecological stuff that's like, it's a bummer. It's a real bummer. And it makes me want to try to plant my yard and plan my yard in a way that, I want to grow some milkweed so that the butterflies have a place to, you're basically making a bus stop for butterflies. So they got a place to migrate. And I want to plant native stuff when I can and get rid of the invasive stuff when I can. But it was really interesting. I mean, I didn't expect to be as into all this stuff as I was. And there's a lot of crazy stories. I think I'll just go through. This is like the top 4 or 5 worst invasive species we got here in Tennessee. I found it very interesting. And it was so like the number one that everybody knows kudzu, right? Kudzu is it's the Kardashian of invasive species. It's everybody knows it. It's actually not that bad compared to the other like stuff that's out there, but it's just like famously people don't like it. That's what I mean by Kardashian, right? People go like, they stink. And then you're like, well, are they different than any other celebrity? And you're like, not really. But yeah, so kudzu was a vine that they brought here. It's from Japan. And they brought it here because in the Dust Bowl, everything was messed up, right? There was all this erosion in these fields because the conditions changed in the 30s and 40s, so farmers couldn't grow anything, and their fields are just dust. So they were like, we got to bring something that can just take off, right? Can just grow. Actually, I read originally it came to America at the World's Fair at the same time that they debuted the telephone, which is I like thinking that someone was at the World's Fair looking at like the telephone and kudzu and just being like, I don't know, I wonder if these will take off. So they brought it over. It was like ornamental, and it's in Japan. It grows, but then the winter it dies back. So it's kind of kept in check. But here it's a little warmer, so it just grows. It just nonstop. And during the Dust Bowl, the government was like, we'll pay you in today's dollars like $200 an acre to plant it because they thought it would help with erosion. Which, I get it, kind of. You want to help people not have farms erode. But this thing is nuts. This thing is like, kudzu grows a foot a day, which is insane. I mean, a foot a day, you can literally just watch it in like a chair. That's a crazy amount. And it can grow up to 100 feet tall. And you see it, all along the highways, everywhere it basically grows anywhere you displace the soil, or anywhere you break stuff up, that's where it grows, which means that anything we build, it basically follows us. It's like your clingiest friend. You know what I mean? He's like, can I come? And you're like, oh, all right, fine. And it just stinks. It doesn't smell, not like the tree of heaven, but it's a weird thing to just think that kudzu, which is everywhere. I mean, I do road comedy, so I see it for, just hundreds of miles. And the government was paying people to plant it. They thought it was great. They were like, this is going to be awesome. They had a guy who called himself like the kudzu kid. He sounds like the biggest dork in the world, but he was a radio DJ in Georgia, Covington, Georgia, and he was like, plant kudzu. All the girls will think you're swell. And then they had a kudzu fan club. A lot of this stuff is insane. That's my big takeaway. I mean, I'm getting pretty into the garden, but if I ever try to get you to join the kudzu fan club, just know that this podcast has gone too far. So anyway, they grow it, and it's everywhere. But another thing that's weird about it is it's not the big threat. It's not. Kudzu is just. It seems like the big threat because it's like it's always where you are, right? It it's like a fart on a plane. It just stays where people are, but it's not. It actually can't grow. And like once you get into the shade, once you get into the deep forest, it can't really grow because it needs the light. So in a weird way, it's not that big a problem. It's like I think I read it's 1% of the acreage in the South, which is or 1% of 1%, something like that, which is bad, but it's not a big problem. And then there's a real problem. There's a plant that nobody even knows is a problem that apparently this is the Mac Daddy of problem plants, and I didn't even know about it. And there's a plant called Chinese privet, which is again, it just makes me laugh every time because it does sound like you're blaming the other country. You're like Chinese privet. I'm just telling you the name. There's a plant called Chinese privet, and it grows just super well. And you can plant it in. You can still buy it at like Home Depot and Lowe's. That's what's crazy about it. All the environmental people are like, don't do that, but you can do it. And I don't mean environment, not like the guys blocking the roads. I just mean like I actually emailed the professor at UT Knoxville, and he was nice enough to send me some stuff to read. But just guys like that, people who are teaching stuff about the environment, colleges, or just care about it. So they were talking about, apparently this is the big problem, the Chinese privet, and you get planted in suburbs, right? And it looks nice, and it's fine, and it gets these little white flowers. But the way it spreads is it makes berries, and then birds eat the berries, and then they go off and they poop them out, and then that's how it spreads. And it's a good system. It's funny. The more I read about this, you like can't believe how much this plant sucks. Because, okay, so this one can go into the forest, right? And when it goes into the forest, it just crowds everything out. It's like a shrub, and it just stops. No light gets to the forest floor. And usually in like a healthy environment, everything's got to roll, right? There's like, these things grow to this height, and then there's, some leaves, and there's fungi, and there's whatever. I'm not smart enough to know what's going on, but apparently this thing just comes in and just wrecks shop. It just takes over. Nobody else gets a chance. And it just makes this incredibly sterile atmosphere. And then the birds, when they eat it, the berries they look like berries that have the nutrients that I guess regular berries have, but they don't. They're like Sour Patch Kids for birds. They say these berries have no nutrients, and the birds get like sick and weak from eating these. And they think they're getting full, but they're not. It's like a really crazy system. And then they mess up rivers, and you're like, how is a shrub messing up the river? And the way it works is, so a lot of stuff along the riverbank, right, that holds the soil has these deep roots. Stuff that grows along the riverbank has deep roots. That's what holds it there. That's what keeps the river from eroding. 3 to 5 feet in a lot of stuff. This stuff has really, really shallow roots, like a foot or something. So this thing grows all along the riverbank, shades out all the other plants, and then when the waters rise in the winter, it just wrecks the river because the roots just collapse. The riverbank collapses because the roots aren't strong enough. So you're just all across the South. It's messing up rivers and changing the biology of it. And I never even heard of this thing. And I'm out in the garden. I like learning about this stuff, but I had never heard of it till this episode. So pretty interesting. Again, and it was just something they brought it over because it was pretty. It was like an ornamental, and I think they said like rich people were buying it, which then makes everybody else buy it. That's what's crazy. You start to realize reading about this stuff, people just buy plants because other people are buying them, and they don't like have opinions on, do we like this plant? And I'm not saying I wouldn't do that. I didn't know anything about plants until I kind of went down this road. But just wild to me that there's just some guy was like, I like this. It's nice. And then they brought it over, and it's like, they said Tennessee spends like $4 million a year fighting these invasive species, and we're like not even making a dent. And you're like, man, just one guy who was like, I kind of like that. And they were like, that's a massive problem for the entire region. Nice going. And then the other plant that got me into this is the one I'd heard about first. This was the first plant I heard sucked. And I was so curious because I remember being like, that was the moment it clicked to me that like, oh yeah, I guess not all these plants, when you are a kid, you just assume if it's growing, it's supposed to. And if it's green, it's good and all that. But The Bradford pear tree is this tree that we got all over. It's everywhere, and it stinks. It's the worst tree. So the whole story is, in the 1920s, they had all these pear trees out west, and they started getting a disease called fire blight, which was just, a bacterial fungus or something that's killing all our trees. So they said, all right, let's try to breed our trees with some Asian trees and see if that solves it. And it did. And they were like, all right, so now we have some pears that can survive this thing, which is great. But then they kept cultivating it and kept, messing with it. And eventually they got this version that was, people really liked it, especially like suburbs, like HOA designers, because it was this really delicate little sculptural, it went straight up and then had little branches that made like a perfect oval. And it, looked like suburbs, like the HOA ones, where they just want these sort of like equidistant, identical trees every 10 feet, which I never understand. I think that looks so much worse than like just letting people do stuff and, seeing different trees. And I don't know. I guess that's the whole debate with HOAs. I just don't understand. I go, who are you to tell me what we're doing? Let me just try some stuff and it'll look better if people actually like care about their yards and can do stuff. But whatever. We don't have to get in HOAs again. I do want to defund the HOA shirt. I like that. I think that's fun. I'm at that stage of my life, right? When I was 25, I would have seen that and been like, what? And now I'm 33. I'm like, that's awesome. I would love a defund the HOA shirt. So anyway, they start putting these Bradford pears out, and people are loving them. Like apparently in the 50s and 60s, this was the hot new tree. People were going crazy about it. And they were these delicate things. They had these white flowers, and they were sterile. That was the big important thing, right? This tree does not reproduce, so you don't have to worry about, with other trees like oaks drop acorns, and then they can become trees, and they get they have these they reproduce in some mechanism, and this tree doesn't. So they were like, great, we'll put it in our weird sterile little areas, downtowns and stuff like that, and it'll just be there. It'll be great. And then as time went on, like 15, 20 years later, they started to realize this tree kind of sucks because the way it grows those branches, it's really fragile. So every time there's a windstorm or an ice storm, they crack and they fall, and they're like, kind of a hazard. That's especially in Nashville, you start to realize that after a while. They suck. In that last ice storm, they were all probably going nuts. And then they do the same thing. So 20 years go by, whatever, some time goes by, and then they start kind of mutating on their own. They start like cross cultivating with other trees, I guess. I'm not smart enough to tell you how, but basically the people who said this is sterile were wrong, and it's not sterile. And it starts again. It's Jurassic Park. This tree starts mutating. It starts showing up in weird places. There's a variant of it now that has these 4-inch thorns. That's like the wild offspring of this tree has 4-inch thorns, and it like punctures tractor tires and just there's like all sorts of YouTube videos I was watching of people being like, the Bradford pear tree destroyed my yard. Like, it's just crazy. It's the worst variation of this tree that you can imagine. And they do great, and they grow everywhere, and people don't like them so much that there's bounty programs. Like in South Carolina, if you destroy this tree and bring it I guess it's like with like wild pigs where you shoot it and then bring it. You show them the destroyed Bradford pear tree, they'll give you a free native tree. And they just are bad. They're banned in Ohio. They're banned in Pennsylvania. They're not banned in Tennessee, although people are trying to ban them, which is very funny. But it's just funny that, like, again, we were like, this will solve a problem. We need, natural trees are too crazy. I guess that's what they thought. They said these regular maple trees and tulip poplar trees are too crazy for my project. I need a tree that I can trust. I need a tree that's not going to get into anything crazy. And then, irony, it just is the worst possible tree. In trying to bring in this thing to solve what doesn't even seem like a problem to me. You know, like I don't know why you couldn't just plant whatever local trees are there and let them be beautiful and cool. They try to bring in this new tree. They go, it's sterile. It doesn't even, it's like, you know, it's got the same shape. It's uniform. And then within like 20 years, it's wrecking all sorts of stuff. And I mean, that part makes me sad. I feel bad that it just, you know, these mistakes one or two people make end up being a huge problem for lots of people. But it is, I don't know. I was thinking about that a lot just in the context of all these things, right? Anything that is cool, I think people sort of overthink it and they insert themselves in it and they ruin it, right? I was watching this thing on why there's no bands anymore, and they were saying basically just because all these annoying people got in the way, right? All these managers and producers and manager/producers and A&R people and industry people, you know, industry people in general, I think not a lot of good stuff I've seen in my time. And it's just, you know, they insert themselves. It's no longer, you know, this musician who's trying to write the best song. It's now like, we're trying to find a hit. We're trying to get you on a radio station. And you look at the history of music, there's all these scandals, right? There's people paying stuff to get on the radio. There's like this sort of way that all the music sounds the same, and these record labels, you hear about these horrific deals they sign them to. It's just, you know, people see an opportunity to like sort of mess with the system, right? If the system is, you know, we have an ecosystem and it functions, and you know, it's not perfect, but it was really well designed. Nature did a great job. That's another thing, doing garden stuff. You get kind of blown away by just how well everything kind of counterbalances and works, and, you know, this feeds that, which feeds that. I mean, even just watching a tree go for like in a full year, grow, you know, flower, then drop its leaves to save the energy, then the leaves self-propagate. It's a cool system. You know, there's all those people like Einstein and all the other scientist people who are like, you know, nature is the most incredible designer we got. All this stuff is like perfect. That's, you know, there's a lot of stuff in nature where you're like, if someone made that, that'd be the most incredible thing I've ever seen. And a lot of the way these animals work and, you know, all the life cycles, it makes me go, yeah, don't mess with the system. And, you know, I'm not saying that's the same with the music industry, but I am saying, like, a lot of times there's a normal thing. People want to make movies, and so they try to make interesting movies. And then time goes by and the movie industry starts saying, you got to make sequels that we can dub in Chinese to make more money. And you're like, well, we've lost the point here. This is like once you start doing that, you're going to make bad movies, because it's just, what is the point? This is crazy. Like, you want to make the thing that should, you know, keep the main thing. And it feels like with a lot of these people who mess with the natural ecosystems, it's them trying to, you know, get around the system. They're going, I would like to tweak that. And you go, this thing is an incredible system. It's very balanced. Please don't mess with it. And it was interesting. I mean, that's sort of the lesson I came away with from all this stuff, was just going, man, a lot of this stuff is sort of miraculous as it is. And, you know, I'm more blown away by all the stuff that does function in nature and gardens and the forest and all this stuff, that I'm more like, wow, this is an amazing system, rather than being like, we could fix this. I have a lot less faith that humans should intervene. I go, I don't know. That might not be a good idea. But I guess, you know, agriculture and all sorts of stuff has kind of been the process of taming these things. So I don't want to go too crazy, but it was just, it was an interesting deep dive. I mean, it was really, now there's some weird effects on my life. I just now drive around with my friends and go like, oh no, do you see that? And they're like, no. And I go, it's a tree of heaven. And they're like, all right, great. Can't wait to drive 6 hours with you to some comedy gig. But yeah, I don't know. It did make me think. That is sort of the parallel to me. It's, you know, when people start messing with the system for the wrong goals, you know, when people go like, I want a tree that will fit in my suburb. And you're like, well, that's not what trees are for. That's not, trees play this role in this whole ecosystem. They're not like, you shouldn't mess with the trees to get one that looks nice in a weird subdivision. That's correct. And you certainly shouldn't bring a new one in that might, disrupt everything, so that you can I don't know, have an easier hedge or whatever. That's like a lot of the reasons these things got brought over is they were like, that's a nice, I'll just bring that over. And it's like, man, that's the scale of these things too, where it's like, you just start to realize some guy liked Chinese privet and 34 million acres later, you're like, wow, that's a huge problem. Yeah, I don't know. It made me think about a lot of that stuff, about how movies got bad, the 2008 housing crisis, right? Where you're like, listen, mortgages are for paying for a house. They're not, you shouldn't be collateralizing them and gambling on them and all the stuff that happened in The Big Short. That's not what a mortgage is for. And once you start going down that road, it's like, all right, well now we're screwed. Now we're gonna be, it's like how politicians shouldn't be getting elected so they can get insider trading on stocks. They should be trying to lead their communities. But I don't think anybody thinks that's what they're doing. It's once you lose sight of the main thing, stuff gets messed up real fast. And that was, yeah, I mean, that's kind of a funny, I get it if you're like, that's a jump. That's a little bit of a jump for, you learned about 3 trees and now you're making all these wide sweeping judgments. But that's how I felt about it, and that's how, that's such kind of, it's a negative episode a little bit. I feel bad. I hope this didn't bum you out, but yeah, it's interesting, the invasive species, and I'm not having a negative time at all out in the garden. I'm really having fun. I have so many projects. I can't wait to see all this stuff bloom. So many things I planted last year are paying off now. That's another fun thing about having a garden, is it's like you get so much of modern life is like an immediate payoff, right? You're like, let me post this and see what happens. Or, let me send this message and see what happens. But with the garden, it's like there's stuff I planted in October that's now, it's like, oh wow, it's gonna make it. That thing took off. We had this big azalea that we had to dig out of the ground when we first moved in because it was just in a bad spot. And it was huge. And I had to dig it out with a shovel and then get under it and pry it out, and it was crazy. And then it was out of the ground for 10 days, and this is the middle of the summer, and I was like, that thing's dead for sure. And I felt pretty bad about it. And then my wife was like, just plant it anyway, which is that's a very wife thing to say. She goes, just dig a giant hole, and then plant it. No, she helped. She was great. So I planted it, and then it was looked dead all fall, all winter. And I was like, it's a bummer, and I'm going to have to go take it out. And, it just was a negative thing. And then it's back. It's growing. I went and looked at it the other day. It's growing. It's going to come back, and it's pretty amazing to me that it was out of the ground for 10 days and just, I guess, held on. Was like, I believe in this guy. And now I'm trying to, I have a different azalea that's healthy, and I'm trying to propagate azaleas off of it. You can take the new growth and sort of pin it to the ground, like a new branch off of it. This is at least what I understand. Definitely, there's smarter people about it than me. But you pin a rock to it, right? So the roots are touching the dirt. And then if you give it a few days, that will root, right? And then you can dig that out. You can dig under it, get those roots, and you got to take rooting hormone, which I've been taking just to get stronger. That's not true. And you put it in a pot, and it'll grow from there. And so I'm hoping to grow a bunch of azaleas off our original azalea and then give them to my buddies. And, my buddies are irresponsible comedians. They'll probably let them die, but I'll feel good. I'll feel nice. If even one of my friends plants an azalea that they like and I grew it, that'll be cool. And it's a long time horizon thing. You know what I mean? It's not immediate gratification. It's you do stuff and then you see it pay off, months or weeks or even years later. That's like, we planted some trees when it was my wife's birthday when we first moved in, and we planted some trees. And now I look at that tree and I go, oh, that's her birthday tree from back then. And it'll be cool when it gets big. And all this stuff's just been great. I really, it's a crazy time out there. Every day I read I read about a lot of the AI stuff and I try to stay up on it. But every day it's like the craziest. They're like, there's a new, with one sentence, you can now run a bank. And you're like, what the? So I like having a hobby that's the opposite of that. That, you know, people from 1,000 years ago would be like, oh, I get what you're doing. And it's nice. So I hope you don't have to get in the garden to listen to this podcast, but I hope you like the podcast. And I got some more episodes planned. I'm kind of just going into whatever I get into. But I really liked all the feedback people sent. That's very nice, and it makes it feel very fun for me to know that people are listening to this on the other end. I got shows coming up as well. I have stuff if you're listening and you want to come see a show. This will come out next week. So May 1st and 2nd, I will be in Dallas and then Houston at the Majestic Theater in Dallas and somewhere else in Houston, opening for my buddy Dusty Slay. So come to those shows. Always very fun in Texas. And then May 21st, I will be taping a little special at the Lab at Zany's here in Nashville. So come to that if you want. And should be really fun. I've been working on it. I'm very excited about it. And yeah, thanks again for listening. I will see you guys next week.